So you've bought yourself a brand new fancy knife. Now you need to maintain it. Hi, I'm Jed from Cook Culture. So once you buy yourself a great knife, the most important thing is to maintain that knife. So I'm a big fan of somebody buying a knife that feels really good in their hand. It really doesn't matter about what you spent on that knife. It can be a 40-year-old knife that your grandparents had. It doesn't really matter where you got it. If some of the key components of that knife are of quality, then that knife is going to be easily maintained. So the key to keeping a knife maintained is to maintain it. So I have tons of customers over the years that have bought themselves a beautiful new blade and they have said, yeah, I'm gonna maintain it, and they just don't. And they bring it to us between the time they buy it to the time that it needs sharpening without any maintenance in between. And the problem there is that the more that we sharpen a knife, the life we take out of that knife. So we take years out of a knife of regular use when we grind a new edge onto a knife. And all that's doing is just degrading the quality of knife, and it's degrading the longevity of the knife. So I highly stress when you buy a good quality knife, being a Japanese or a Western knife, is that you need a tool at home to maintain it every day, or at least once a week at a bare minimum. And what that means is that you are looking after the condition of your cutting edge. So the cutting edge on a high quality knife, if it's an Asian knife or a Western knife, doesn't matter, is that the end of that knife, at the point of the sharp edge, is like a pin. It's really, really delicate. And in the kitchen, it can be easily abused. And what I mean by that is that you have a sharp edge, and from pulling your food towards you and using your knife for that, you can easily take the edge and round it and just roll it over. Really simply to be done. And then your knife is of a lower quality. You're gonna find you're gonna go to cut yourself into a tomato and you don't have a sharp point anymore. That point is now over here. And this happens easy, especially if you're a righty like I am and you keep pulling your knife in the same direction over and over because you like to clean your board that way. Over and over and over and over that goes, right? To a point where it's like, oh, my knife is dull. Your knife is not actually dull, it's just completely out of alignment. So what you need to do there is that you use a steel, like so, or you use a pull-through knife sharpener. And pull-through knife sharpeners have become much, much higher quality over the last several years, to a point where they do not damage the blade, they do not damage the side of the blade, don't score the blade, they work beautifully well. So an old thinking is that these will ruin your blade. These are fantastic. So this one is meant for Japanese, you can get them for Western, you can get them that they are Western and Japanese, so or Asian. And they work beautifully, and the reason that I love them so much is that they are meant for the right angle. You put them in, all you do is just draw them back and forth, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do, and it's really quite brainless, and you can maintain your knives without thinking about it. Using a steel, it takes more practice. You need to have to understand how to connect the knife to the rod at the right pressure and the right angle. It's just a little bit more of a method to learn, not hard, but for a lot of people, this method is dead simple. So maintaining your knives at home on the daily, or at least once a week, is critical to owning a high quality knife, or any knife really for that matter. You can do all your knives, it doesn't matter where they came from or what you paid for them. So I couldn't stress that part enough. So when you're buying a high quality knife, learn how to maintain. So really, really, really important. So the next video is going to be the simple process of using a pull-through sharpener and a steel. So there's an old myth in knife maintenance that a pull-through knife sharpener doesn't work very well. So the reason for this is that back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, there were a lot of pull-through knife sharpeners that came onto the market that were really crappy, and they just thrashed knives. They were, for whatever reason, just poorly made, poorly designed, and you would pull your knives through them and they would just make a mess of them. So that has been carried forward to really tarnish what is actually a tremendously useful tool. So just to be clear, most all modern pull-through knife sharpeners work really, really well, regardless of the brand. Today I'm going to show you a MinoSharp. This is a Japanese-made pull-through ceramic sharpener. It's water-based, and it works incredibly well for Asian knives. However, we use also a brand called Chef's Choice, and it's for pull-through style of Western knives. It works incredibly well for Western knives. So the reason that I'm a big fan of pull-through knife sharpeners is that they are all made to work on the angle for the knife that we're using, which just makes it super, super simple. So as you're pulling the knife through the knife sharpener, it is sharpening or honing, it is maintaining that blade at the right angle. You don't have to worry about, am I getting the right angle? Is this working or is this not working? It is guaranteed to work for you. So there's a simple method on using these guys, is that you're just dropping the heel in, a couple of pounds of pressure, not much pressure, pushing down into the sharpener, and just back and forth. And when it works, it feels good in there. So it feels like it's connected. It feels like it's got a little bit of texture as it's going across the stone. You're not pushing right down into it, no shoulder, no real elbow, just a little bit of wrist pressure into it and back and forth. It's got a nice, simple noise to it where it feels or sounds like it's grinding and maintaining the edge. And just back and forth and back and forth. You try to go right from heel to tip evenly and back and forth. And this is a dual stage. So here I'm into the white one, I'm going back and forth, and then I go over and into this is a pink stone, but this is a higher grit stone. Again, heel in and back and forth. And just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You know, if you do it all the time, you just need to do it 4 or 5 times per use and from each stone, and it works beautifully. So then grab yourself a piece of paper, test your knife, and it works beautifully. So really, really simple to do. It can be for Western or Asian, but pull through is what I suggest highly to most everybody to have at home. The reason for it is that it's so simple that you will do it on the daily, hopefully, but at least once a week. Also, when you've done using your knives, you've cleaned them, that's the best time to maintain them. Maintain them after you cook. Really simple to do while you're cleaning up. Put them away, and then they're ready to go for when you're ready to use them. So sharpening steel is a very useful tool. The reason for it is that the right steel can sharpen lots of types of knives. So mostly we're talking about Western knives and Asian knives, and a good steel can do both. So when you're buying a steel and you do have Western and Asian knives at home, it's important to find a steel that has quite a soft feel to it. So a steel, a metal steel, is made with lots of grooves running down it from one end to the other through the outside of the rod. So if they're too coarse, you'll find that they can score a softer steel like a lot of Japanese knives, and they leave it rough. And when you go to cut through, a tomato or something soft, they pull and they have texture to the bevel, which is not awesome. It will sharpen them fine or keep them honed, but it also adds to some texture to them. So really hard Western knives do need more texture. So sometimes one steel won't work for your Western knives and your Asian knives. So it's important to be buying your steel from a retailer that understands your knives and will get you the right rod for the knives that you have at home. So how to use a steel. So the easiest way to learn how to use a steel is to get yourself a cloth on your bench and to put your rod straight down. A lot of time your steel will be have a collar and will have a thinner and a thicker way in which it works. So what you will do with the thinner way that the collar works is that you'll put it down on the rod and use that as a bit of a guide, a starting point. Just lean it up against there, and that's gonna give you a very close angle to what you're looking for. Because what happens here and what stresses a lot of people is that it's very hard to know what is a 20-degree angle or a 15-degree angle or a 12-degree angle. Like how do you know when you're pulling your knife down the rod that you're getting the right angle? That confuses almost everybody. So the best way that I can explain this is that there is a texture that happens between the edge of the blade and the rod as you bring it down. So this is a feeling that you can feel in the handle of the knife. So you don't want to come at it sideways, so you do want to get close to that angle to begin with, and that's why the guiding point of the side of the steel is really helpful. But as you come down, you are creating a type of method or movement, is that you're starting right at the heel against the rod and you're bringing the knife down and pulling it back at the same time. So you're kind of creating a circle. You're not going straight down, you're not coming straight back, you're coming down and rolling the knife to the tip. You're doing your best, of course, to try to keep it aligned and straight, but like I was saying, there is a texture or a feeling of where the two types of steel meet, that when you're on the bevel and coming to the edge, you'll feel a little bit of tension in that relationship. It won't just slide freely. So you're looking for that small feeling of going back and forth. So you can't ruin a blade here by using this rod and this knife. You can make it duller, of course, but you're not gonna ruin it. So do not be afraid of putting a bit of time into it and honing it. You can't really over hone a knife. You can make the edge thinner and more brittle, so you may find if you've honed it a ton, the blade gets duller faster, but you actually would have started with it being sharper to begin with, so it's a bit of an advantage. However, what you're looking to do in this practice of learning this method is that you are going to start from the heel and go to the tip, again in that nice rounded way, and you're going to put a couple of pounds of pressure, not a lot. You really don't want to push hard, or you're going to find that if you push too hard, you're just not able to maintain the right angle as you bring it down. And you are starting point, just hit up against whatever is on the handle, and just use that as your guide. And just back and forth and back and forth, and just play with your angle just a little bit until you find where that small amount of texture is. And when you find it, you'll just get that sweet spot. I also suggest to have a piece of paper handy so that when you want to test your knife, you can use the paper to see how sharp it feels. So you'll learn over time how sharp you can get that one knife. Like, you can continue playing and playing and playing to try to prove it further, but honing will really only take it back to its original sharpness. So if you keep honing, you're not going to be sharpening the knife anymore. All it's doing is taking it back to its original state of sharpness. So that is feeling nice and sharp. That works well for me, and now I'm ready to use that. So again, in practicing, you want to get the knife onto the board, onto a cloth, and just work your angle, and just until you get to the point that you're feeling comfortable. Once you feel comfortable with that, as you've seen many chefs on TV shows, they are working their blade, you're gonna go in the opposite direction. This is where the wider part of your collar is going to protect you. So you want to make sure that you're always bringing your knife down towards the sharp part of the collar. So again, if you're gonna use it up in the air like this, you're going to start from the heel and go to the tip. And this becomes more difficult to maintain your angle. And the reason I suggest to start this way is that you can really work your angle properly. Here, it really comes down to a feel. You're going to have gotten used to the feel on the board, and now you're going to be able to use that knife to get the feeling on your steel. So you don't have to be going at 1,000,000 miles per hour. I have lots of chef friends that pride themselves on sharpening their knives in a split second. That's great, but it's not important. The method of how it rounds as you're coming around the knife is what's critical. So rolling the knife down and trying to stay at a good angle or the same angle you've learned that way. So this is about practice. Using a rod takes some time. Hone, 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 knife on the paper, hone, 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 knife on the paper, until you're like, yeah, that's feeling great. And over time, it'll become a little bit of second nature. It is a tool that you have to learn. So take your time with it, enjoy it, use it all the time. It's critical to maintain your knives on the daily, or at the very least once a week. So I hope that helps. Thanks so much.